Happy Friday, everyone, and it's the 16th episode of HeleCloud Talks Cloud. We have another two interesting guests. It's myself and Walter on top, and our guest at the bottom. This is not symbolical in any way.
Nice opening, Lena.
I have invited Bobby. He was someone I worked with at my first IT job at a web hosting company a century ago. Hi, Bobby. Nice to meet you again. And we also have Remon. Remon, if you want to say a few words about yourself.
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Remon. I work with NN Investment Partners. And for that part, I run the Cloud Center of Excellence and the cloud migrations with my team and colleagues, so to speak. So, in a nutshell.
Okay, Bobby, I'll let you present yourself as well so that we don't just count on my words.
Thanks. Yeah, and also, as you said, a century has passed since that part was true. I actually worked as a developer, as a QA, also some business-related stuff over the years, and I ended up being a DevOps engineer and currently leading a small DevOps team in a big company. The company is called Cognite Bulgaria, part of Cognite, which is based mostly in Israel, and we deal with cyber intelligence and cybersecurity solutions. As it was mentioned in the previous episode, I strongly suggest you go ahead and watch that, as well as the previous episode of the show in general. I am a cloud laggard, meaning that I lag behind in the cloud game, but we are all businesses doing fine, and we are going forward with the cloud more and more. So hopefully that will help us go even better in our business goals.
Yes, cool. It's important to just end up on the cloud at some point. Better late than never, right?
Well, it's important to give yourself a little bit of room also to observe what's optimal for your company. We do that the same, and then is a customer of AWS, but also Azure, like a multiple cloud setup, so to speak. The business unit which I'm working in is primarily focused on AWS. So we have gathered significant knowledge and skills and abilities to actually operate efficiently in AWS. Hence also the reason why I'm there, coming from AWS myself. So, and this is also how I know Walter for a long time.
Yep.
By the way,
yeah, it's interesting because one of the things that we talk about regularly is the fact that there's quite a war on talent, and that people of the skill level of Remon, he's very good at being very modest, but actually is very good at what he does. People who are at that skill level, they get to choose companies, and you see that companies that are in the laggard part of the situation are having quite a bit more trouble attracting high-skilled cloud talent, and are having to go the route of educating their existing staff, and that's it's quite a interesting challenge.
By the way, speaking of choosing when to go to the cloud, I remember a friend of mine, his company got bought by the competition. And the competition was having their product on AWS, and my friend's company had on-prem infrastructure. And when they got bought, they were like, the company that bought them said, we need to understand what you're doing with infrastructure, because your infrastructure for the same product, nearly the same user base, is 18 times cheaper than what we currently have. But the trick was that the buyer actually had this weird company culture where they were forcing their teams to always choose the top, most famous, most recently released technology, and that's a recipe for disaster. Like they had so many problems with the infrastructure. But Kubernetes.
I remember talking to a Dutch organization, doesn't really matter who, and a large organization, and they said, Walter, the cost of AWS bit for bit isn't really our concern, considering that when we tally it up, it's like the cost of infrastructure is something like 5% of the total cost of ownership of entire application stack. If you factor in everything from salaries of staff to training and everything else, the cost of the infrastructure is really
negligible,
irrelevant to the whole story.
Yeah. What about all the security and regulatory items which come into play nowadays? Like myself, we're in a regulated environment, financial, so fintech. Yeah. The amount of people surrounding that, which, by the way, are using a lot of analog systems to do all this checking and little lists and meetings, etc. It's very inefficient in a sense. I'd say that it might even equal in some situations the cost
Probably
for the infrastructure itself.
And one of the things that I find is that because there's no real clarity, because there's so many different security frameworks and governance frameworks as well, that very often what I end up hearing, and it's one of my pet peeves, somebody saying, "Oh, we cannot do that because." Or whatever the standard of the day is, HIPAA or PCI DSS or whatever. And when you think about it, like that seems unlikely that is actually the case. But it's very easy to use it as a shield to not have to do something. You just say, "Oh, we cannot do that because of HIPAA," and then if you're lucky, nobody asks any further questions, and that actually stifles quite a few conversations, especially in more traditional companies. I've seen it more than 0 times where people are like, "Oh no, we cannot do that because of X, Y, Z." I'm like, I know these regulations fairly well, and I don't think that it's anywhere in there. Can you point me to specifically where, which clause or which statement disallows that? And then it goes quiet.
Then I call the first time.
But it's also funny, and we were talking in the pre-brief a sec about this. What you are mentioning now, all they are American standards, right? We continuously refer to these, and of course, in the Netherlands, in Europe, we have Dutch National Bank standards, etc. They also refer a lot to the American ones. At least they have some, but more out there publicly, we tend to refer indeed very strongly to FedRAMP, to HIPAA, PCI, etc. For those standards. But they are kind of all dictated by American companies, so to speak.
It's the funny bit of the XKCD comic. There are 14 standards. That's horrible. Let's create a 15th one so we can standardize, and now we have 15 standards.
But what's funny is when I was investigating those standards for the managed services operation that I am running in HeleCloud, they actually overlap at I think about 70-80%, because it's just baseline security. There is not a lot of difference. If you look at the specific controls underneath each compliance standard, there's not a lot of difference. It's the main difference is that one compliance standard is associated with one type of business and another with a different type of business. So you have HIPAA for medical stuff, and you have PCI DSS for credit cards.
Yeah. We also had some news articles that we wanted to talk about. So the first one is a simple little tool. I found it on Reddit. Reddit is a place where I get a lot of my news and my updates. Some guy just quickly made this mostly as a coding exercise, but it's actually quite interesting. What it does is it allows you to query across 10 different public cloud providers the costs of instance types. So this is obviously a very small piece of the puzzle, and absolutely not something you should base your cloud choice off. But it is very interesting to do a quick comparison to see how different the costs are. And I played around with it a little bit yesterday, and it's actually quite interesting to see if you say something very relatively vague, like I want an instance with about 16 gigs of RAM and about 12 CPUs somewhere in Europe. It'll tell you exactly which cloud providers are more and less expensive. And I'm not advocating you should move workloads because of this, but it's definitely good to have a little look around and see what's there and what the situation is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
indeed.
definitely. Yeah, Remon, go ahead.
No, I was just playing around with the tool as well, as Walter dropped this in our labs about 10 minutes ago.
Yeah,
So,
actually,
but I recall that there was also another a similar kind of tool, but I don't think it was for multiple clouds, so to speak. At least one for AWS. You had somewhat of an overview application online as well for this, not by AWS. But it's an interesting development, and I wonder how. Well, two things come to mind, like how frequently are these prices indeed linked and updated, and is that
once a week?
Is that live? Yeah, okay, once a week. And there's a nice little launch button. So is there an affiliation thing going on?
I wouldn't be surprised.
So it's creative though. I'm surprised that this didn't exist before that.
Probably there are versions of this.
They're saying we're working on one-click provisioning feature, but enter your email if you want to be notified when it starts working. So maybe they're still contacting cloud providers and like, how much are you willing to pay?
Yeah, for an affiliate program with me, because I have this thing that you don't have. In my eyes, this should be something that the APIs of the different cloud providers should expose. Although I know that this sounds like a very tall order, and this is most probably scraped from APIs and web interfaces, because you have so many cloud providers that if you don't expose a standard, number 16 standard, say, hey, I want you to give me an API for your VM provisioning system and pricing, because these details are public as is. I don't have to have a login. I don't have to pay to get this information. So, for example, these details are, to me, very important if you want to go somewhere, not to transition from somewhere, but where do you want to go? And for you, infrastructure is mostly cost, but you have to have some infrastructure. You don't care about what it provides to you, but what it takes away from you. So in this case, you're willing to pay how much, but okay, what are my options? Because Amazon or anyone else, they won't give you a live comparison chart on their documentation page saying, we are here in comparison to our competitors. So this is both a really cool exercise for the person, and I believe a tool for small and medium-sized businesses.
Yeah, well, it's interesting how everything is starting to be more transparent with these kind of tools as well, right?
Exactly. It provides transparency and observability.
Yeah, for years, whenever we want to buy a new vacuum cleaner or a high pressure cleaner, whatever, you have 10,000 comparison websites telling you where and when to pick up your new order if you just click here. Is the cloud infrastructure becoming more and more of a commodity item with this kind of thing? And is running in cloud therefore also becoming more of a commodity thing also for the mid and small size businesses, especially with these kind of things?
This is exactly like those websites where you search for an item and they give you the different options. Where's the cheapest one I could buy? But it's different. As Walter said, like cost alone means nothing in cloud because you're getting different things. It's not like I'm buying a hand cream by Nivea and it's the same thing on multiple different shops. So I just want to take it at the cheapest possible price. Here, you're turning your back on a lot of the criteria that you would otherwise use to choose which one you're getting.
Yeah, so I think that that's very very right. That's how I see it as well. So I think this can be a leader. It's like opening a bank account for your child when he's just born. There's you get some silly gimmick, and then the reality is that you're locked in for life. Like I still have the bank account that my parents opened for me when I was 3 years old. So I think that looking decent on costs can lure in a set of people that aren't necessarily seeing the full picture because they don't necessarily have the full understanding of the whole story, or cost is super important for them. And then later on, that leads to the rest of the ecosystem. So I think there is some merit in not looking horrible in cost.
No, indeed. One of the things I just did was with this tool, just do a very small, your run-of-the-mill WordPress machine, maybe 2 CPU, 8 gigs memory in Europe. So the price differs surprisingly from $12 something to $73.
That's great, yeah.
That's a rather big range as well. So,
our next article, I'm going to change up the order slightly because I want to first talk about this one. There's a story late April, I guess it broke, but we had some interruptions in HeleCloud Talks Cloud of a very interesting case that the FBI caught a guy who thought he was going to bomb AWS and then take 70% of the internet offline. And besides this being really sad that someone gets to that level of violence, of course, the sheer naivety of such a statement is quite interesting. Obviously, AWS is not unique in this, but there are dozens of regions across the world, and each region consists of multiple availability zones that are geographically spread apart, exactly to deal with stupid stuff like this. Obviously, there are many more other reasons why you would want to put things geographically separate, but. Let's say that for fun and games, not fun and games, you were able to demolish a single building. It's not actually going to put a dent into anything other than you ruining your life and potentially the lives of others. But I think we are well past the space where this can be doing any serious damage to internet infrastructure.
It's delusional on other levels as well. He didn't say just that he was going to take down 70% of the internet, but also the oligarchy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's probably some aluminium foil involved in this story. But now people are have the right to their own opinions and ideas and fantasies, so that's all okay. But obviously not when you start taking such attempts and actions. So yeah, is the essential question like how would a thing like this disrupt the internet or disrupt the network? I think there will always be some form, of course, of disruptions. If we just look at this from a technical point of view for a sec. Yeah, you would have take if a data center is damaged, and over time in history we did have incidents here and there where data centers were taken offline because of digging exercises by contractors, and that can happen to any provider, I'd say, in that respect. But yeah, what's the implication? Obviously, massive failover.
I think with those large clouds, if you can make the status page have one tick mark move from green to any other color, you've had a pretty big impact.
I think so too, indeed. Depending on which cloud provider you want to review with a scenario like that, I know more about AWS than any one of the others. But within AWS, you have a single AZ. And you have multiple AZs in a region, but a single AZ always comprises out of a minimum of 2 data centers, I believe. So yeah, indeed, you would potentially there would potentially be an impact to a part of an availability zone, not even a whole one, which would obviously cause a failover to other AZ items. But then, yeah, I think you're right, Walter. It probably would just mean a temporarily flicker of
material damage and a lot of headaches for a bunch of people.
I think so too.
Funny is that someone tried to bomb an AWS data center, but it was actually Office 365 that experienced the problems.
Because they're all interconnected. So
well, that ties back to something that Remon said earlier in the call, and I don't think it gets emphasized often enough, that AWS is actually ahead by a decade of stuff compared to Azure and other places. We still in 2021 see global outages on Azure. And I don't necessarily recall the last time I saw a global outage on AWS, and that kind of global resilience, no matter what the cause of the incident is actually a serious indication of technical maturity of the infrastructure and the platform.
Yeah, one more thing that we've noticed a lot in both my office and in our cloud services is the Google DNS. So the Google DNS is in some cases very essential to us doing business and reaching different services. And if the Google DNS goes down, everyone panics.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the famous 8844.
Exactly. And that's a critical piece of infrastructure worldwide. So.
DNS,
which is a good segue into our next article, which isn't technically public cloud, but at the same time it kind of is. A Gizmodo reporter tried to block all of Amazon, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, and Apple from getting her money, data, and attention. And I don't really need to read the article to know that most likely was a huge disappointment, because unless you go and live in a cabin in the woods where you're completely off the grid, I don't think that this is possible anymore at all.
Yeah, she went quite far as well, right?
Yeah.
Trying to eliminate all IP addresses as well in the stuff that she used besides code. So no websites anymore which use CloudFront. Then you got a tough time.
Also, applications which their backend is actually based in the public cloud providers. Also, Office 365 is a very easy guy to pick on, but a lot of applications that we use regularly, you don't know where their backend is hosted. And technically, the public cloud owns sets of IP ranges. So if somebody really knows the IP range of Amazon and they block it, that will be a huge problem for a lot of companies, because their backend is actually hosted on those IP ranges and they cannot reach their customers.
I mean, just thinking about email, it becomes completely impossible and unusable, because probably a serious percentage of email worldwide gets sent through either Google or Microsoft SMTP servers. So if you're going to block all of those out immediately, then 80% of your email becomes unreliable, and then what? You can just stop relying on that as a medium altogether, because you never know if your email is going to arrive or not.
Well, not just that. Email being quite an arcane method still, but yeah, it's very popular.
It is arcane, but it's like paper administration. It still happens. It's still there.
It's still there, indeed. But even if you start running nowadays your own SMTP server still, you're very likely to include external modules for gray listing, spam control, etc. Guess where they are hosted? Because they need to be scalable and flexible.
Exactly.
I don't think indeed that you are able to run something for real in production anymore without the use of these providers.
In essence, these companies are becoming commodities to the point where water from your tap is a commodity, and we're running into a strange point in time where these companies actually have a fundamental place in our society, that whether we like it or not, it's there. And it's really hard to get rid of, and that's something that doesn't get talked about often enough, I think.
Yeah, and if you take a look at those articles, it's actually a series of articles, but the reporter mentions purchasing a specific laptop which is designed, it's currently a prototype, to use applications which don't rely on the big five. So it attempts to use alternatives, but are those alternatives reliable, scalable, and reachable worldwide? Those are three completely different questions. But really, what are the alternatives? For example, hey, where do you get water from to your home? It's a commodity. You don't think about it. You don't think about alternative water providers. So, but there are instances where you have to. Like if you live in a cabin in the woods.
This triggers me to think also about another news post I saw online, where it basically claimed that the government, with all the apps and the authentication in the Netherlands, we have something called DigiD, that you need to install, etc. But the claim was like that the Dutch government essentially forces us to use Apple and Google with those things. And I didn't really get it at first, but it turns out that those applications are nowadays only available via the Play Stores of either Apple or Google. There is no way anymore to install and use those applications via any other means. And the government has actually selected in full on those two channels, essentially. There's no way around it anymore. And with all the security precautions as well, install things outside of the Play Store is just as well not recommended anymore, and you're warned against it even by other government advisories, right? Use your software from trustworthy sources, make sure that it's scanned and secure, etc. All the things that the Play Store, Google and Apple promote in their Play Stores. But on the other hand, it's directly blocking again for any independent access to those same kind of software applications.
It's a balancing game, right? So you have to be a little bit pragmatic in this whole story, because if you take the purest view, no matter where the purest view is, it's going to be making your life very difficult. And it's difficult.
But it is possible. It is possible. I know people that I work with, people that I collaborate with occasionally. I call them Linux maniacs, or they are very obsessive with security, so they install applications directly provided by developers, but those are small number of people. When you have to address the population of a country, you either have to hire a company whose business model is tightly related to security, or you have to use another provider like Amazon and Google, who do that by default, because that's part of their business model. So it's scalability and reach. In 2021, how can you address the population of the country with, hey, here's a download link to this application for your government needs. That link can be spoofed, DNS poisoned, the application behind it can be substituted. Lots of things can go wrong. So
yeah, it doesn't really solve your problems.
Nope.
It makes you feel like you're more in control, but really you aren't. And I think that's the bigger conclusion.
Yeah. Don't
click
links in email.
Sorry.
Don't click links in email. Right. That's kind of the first thing you tell your elderly family members.
But you know how many people in big organizations actually click all the links in their emails?
I know.
That never happened.
Pass their ISO audit at the end of the year, so that's fine.
It's fine. Nothing's on fire.
Yeah. It's fine. It's fine.
The last article right before we close up, just wanted to talk about it real quickly because it's a nice actual news article. It's about Google winning a deal with SpaceX for Starlink internet connectivity. So SpaceX is working on a satellite constellation that provides internet connectivity to rural places across the planet. And they've signed a deal with Google Cloud to actually have the Google Cloud data centers have ground stations for the satellites installed, so that when you are using Starlink, when you're using Starlink, your internet goes from your Starlink terminal up to the satellites and back down through a ground station in Google Cloud's infrastructure, and it's using the network capabilities of Google Cloud to send your traffic out to in and out to the rest of the world. And so it's not a traditional infrastructure EAS or PaaS deal, but much more something hyper custom. But it is, in my opinion, quite a significant one, because it means that, especially in extension to the rest of the call, all the traffic that you're generating when you're using Starlink actually flows through Google's networks at some point or another.
Yeah. Is this? I wonder where the money is, so to speak, here. So, is this one of those must-have? Like, we want to be in the spotlight. Is there an actual deal here? Yeah, I don't.
My money is on the deal. If you build infrastructure, you get the deal. You're in it in the one game with the big money. When you get the deal, this is why big companies usually build infrastructure. That's my opinion on it.
I think it's day zero for Starlink, right? So it's just now coming online, and there are still some serious problems with it, but it's also providing some seriously cool connectivity. I've seen connectivity from super rural places that were basically still on dial-up plus speeds, and then all of a sudden they're at 100 meg plus up and down link. That is quite cool technology, and add a decade to that, or 2 decades, and we have a whole different story.
Yeah, but Google is also an early investor as well in SpaceX. So it kind of makes sense to extend the line, so to speak, for them. So yeah, obviously it's an investment. Huh? But good for them. I think it will help the development of those outreaches, which are indeed very poorly served right now. If you look at internet connectivity, for us, it's almost unthinkable, starting to be unthinkable. You know, for children, we have especially, right? They go around and there's internet everywhere until it's not.
Until it's not, exactly. You're prone to go to a rural area, to the mountainside, somewhere where there is poor connectivity for one reason or another. Actually, one of the people in my team is eagerly awaiting Starlink because he bought a house in a small village which is far away from any good internet connectivity. So yeah, for him, that's the option coming up.
Yeah.
I don't know. For me, it's the option to rediscover all the games on my phone because I don't have internet, but I still have to, close myself in the bathroom to hide from my family. And that's what you're left with. Games, 2 dots and Sudoku, and you don't need the internet to have fun, is what I'm saying.
That's what Starlink is good for as well, then. Huh? So providing that connectivity in the bathroom. But I think we can only applaud some of the dare here and to invest in this space.
Yeah.
All in all, it's still a commercial business, but they're investing and they're reaching out into areas, and obviously there's a thinking big going on here, and it's not a sure bet. So I'm happy that parties like this take a leap and start installing these kind of things. We will never, be worst of it, and there will be new developments as well coming from it. So really well done.
Time will tell.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're over time a little bit. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. And I want to thank our 2 guests, Remon and Bobby. We had a lot of fun on this episode. So join us again next week.
Sure.
And have a nice weekend away from the internet and the big 5.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
my God. All evil.
And don't bomb anything. Try take a support center hostage, this might actually take a provider down, but not the infrastructure.
Make them drunk. Make
Just
them
turn off
drunk.
your phone.
Yes.
If you're tired of it,
Gonna
turn off
walk
your phone.
fun.
Don't forget your little Raspberry Pi, so you can create your private cloud somewhere in the forest.
Yeah.
No, it's
Bye,
fun as ever.
everyone.
All right.
Bye, everyone. It was a
Bye.
pleasure.
All right. Same likewise.